2 million ready to...
So the president is making an impromptu press conference. Thank you for joining us. I'm Alan Piper, now the senior politics producer. He has already made multiple false statements. He has claimed that the economy was the strongest that it has ever been in history. That is not true on multiple metrics, which I'm happy to get into in a moment.
front. So tremendous progress is being made on that, and I think even without that, and I have to say even without that, and I don't think you're going to be having to use that in the future, that statement, even without, because I think they're going to have it. But we're going to be back, and we're opening our country, and I hope that the lockdown governors, I don't know why they continue to lock down, because if you look at Georgia, if you look at Florida, if you look at...
All right, well, the reason that multiple states are still locked down is because so few states are actually meeting the guidelines that this president has put forward to safely reopen. I would like to highlight that 8,000 Americans have died from coronavirus in just the last week. So the president's characterization that it is no longer necessary to practice precautions is ill-advised. I will also note that no one is wearing a mask and that the seats are placed only 1 foot away from each other, putting the press at risk.
Call me. We'll be ready for them so fast their heads will spin. We did it in Minnesota. In Minneapolis, we were incredible. They were ripping that place apart. I love it. We had such success there.
The president has routinely made false statements about the protests. The protests have been overwhelmingly peaceful. There have been incidents of vandalism and theft, and there have certainly been incidents of apparent excessive use of force by police, but the characterization that cities are being ripped apart is not an accurate characterization.
They didn't want to run. They were told to. It's bad governing, and I'm not blaming the governor, I'm blaming the mayor. But we want to get all of this finished. This is a great tribute. What we're announcing today is a tremendous tribute to equality. We're bringing our jobs back. You know, when we had our tremendous numbers, and when we had, just prior to the China plague that floated in, we had numbers that...
It's not a China plague, it's a worldwide pandemic.
And for Asian American, and for everybody. Best for women, best for people without a diploma, young people without a diploma. I mean, so many different categories. Our numbers were the best in almost every category.
Now, it is not true, the president saying that before this current economic crisis, the economic numbers were the best in almost every category. It is not true. There were more jobs created in President Obama's last 3 years than in President Trump's first 3 years. And even though unemployment for Black Americans has been at a good number, compared to past numbers, it still has been roughly double that of white Americans.
And frankly, it's holding it back. If there were no possibility that can happen, and I like to be an optimistic person, I think we're looking very good. I think even before today, the polls that I've seen and the polls that we do were looking very good.
I would like to highlight that the President of the United States, at a moment when 108,000 Americans have died from coronavirus, when 40 million Americans have lost their jobs, when there are protests against racial injustice in all 50 states, the President is talking about his poll numbers.
Air we've ever had, like over the modern era, which, let's say you go back 30 years, we have the cleanest air, the cleanest water we've ever had. We're setting all sorts of really good environmental records.
This is also not true. In fact, the president just yesterday signed an executive order rolling back, allowing a vast array of construction projects to waive environmental regulations.
Something that this was an important day because this shows that what we've been doing is right. And the reason it's been and is so good is because the body was strong. Our body was so powerful that we could actually close our country, save millions of lives, stop people very early on from China from coming in.
All right, this is a repeated false claim that the president has made about his travel restrictions. He never fully stopped people from entering from China. He has suggested that he did it very early. He in fact, did it in February when already hundreds of thousands of people had entered the U.S. from China, and when 39 countries had placed similar or stronger travel restrictions in place at around that time or earlier.
Ventilator period that the likes of which nobody's seen since the Second World War. We mobilized. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. And then we did tests. We're over 20 million, or very close, but I think we're over 20 million tests, more than anybody in the world.
It is about 18.6 million tests.
Is at 3.5. We're over 20. And by the way, when you do more testing, you have more cases. We have more cases than anybody because we do more testing.
That is actually not the case. We have more cases than anyone because we have more cases than anyone. And we continue to be behind other nations in testing per capita, and most importantly, we are behind other nations in the date at which testing started.
This on to a long period of growth. We'll go back to having the greatest economy anywhere in the world, nothing close. And I think we're going to have a very good upcoming few months. I think you're going to have a very good August, very good July, but a spectacular, maybe spectacular September, but a spectacular October, November, December, and next year is going to be one of the best years we've ever had economically.
Well, economists at Northwestern, Stanford, University of Chicago, and BU predict that the economy will shrink by 11% by the end of this year. A reminder that the president has always overpromised on the economy. He had promised 4% GDP growth during the campaign. Prior to the pandemic, it averaged 2.5%, which is lower than under Reagan or Clinton.
I don't think anything less than that. But if you think we're at 105 million today, the 105,000 today, that would mean at the lowest number, it would be 10 times that amount. And I think everybody believes the least, if we went herd, as they say. And if you look at Brazil, they're having a very hard time.
So the president just said that the U.S. death rate is 105,000. It is actually over 108,000 as of today by Johns Hopkins numbers. And he is again making this argument that this 100,000 deaths is a success because it is better than if he had done nothing. I'd like to remind everyone that in February he was promising that there would be 0 deaths.
At the source, but it's a gift from China, and a very bad gift. I will tell you that.
It is also a strange scapegoating to say that China is to blame because this disease originated in China. The swine flu originated in North America, and no one has been calling it the North America disease and trying to suggest that North America should be held responsible.
Problem. But they didn't stop it cold from coming to the United States, Europe, and the rest of the world. Somebody has to ask these questions, and we'll get down to the answer. You know, we made a great trade deal. Great. They're going to buy $250 billion worth of product. And by the way, they are online. They're doing okay. But the ink wasn't dry on that deal when the plague floated in. What's going on? A plague is floating in from China. What's going on? So the ink wasn't dry, so I guess I view the trade deal a little bit differently than I did 3 months ago. It's a great deal. I will say they are buying a lot from us, and in that way I respect. And getting along with China would be a good thing. I don't know if that's going to happen. I'll let you know. We'll let you know. I think they want to get along very much with us. But we built a tremendous thing, a tremendous power platform. So when it got ill, when we had a problem, we were able to cut it off, stop it, just like this. Stop it.
That is simply a gross mischaracterization of what happened. He said that the coronavirus was stopped. The fact of the matter is that it spread. It spread wildly in this country, and there have been over 108,000 deaths from it in the U.S. at this point. And these deaths have overwhelmingly, disproportionately impacted Black America.
And I have great respect for the people. And they said, will it be 9 million in job losses? Will it be, what will be the number be? Will it be, are they going to report record numbers? Will we break 20%? What will the number be? And, you know, I don't know. because we were in, and I don't think we're in that territory anymore, we were in uncharted territory. Nobody's ever had a situation like that. So the number was 9 million, and one of the people was, no, I think it's going to be 10 million. That's 10 million negative losses. And then somebody else said, no, we think it's going to be 8.7, 9.2. No, everyone was right around that number. This is great geniuses, and they are. I watch them all the time, and oftentimes they're right. Warren Buffett sold airlines a little while ago. He's been right his whole life, but sometimes even somebody like Warren Buffett, I have a lot of respect for him, they make mistakes. They should have kept the airline stocks, because the airline stocks went through the roof today, and others did too. The whole market went through the roof. But
the president likes to cite the strength of the stock market as the strength of the economy. Most Americans do not own stock. The fact that airline stocks went through the roof is very little comfort to 40 million newly unemployed Americans who may be worried where their next rent check is coming from.
Reading it and say, I don't think this, I'm not reading this right. Let me look at it again. Oh, wait a minute. This is 3 million gain almost. 3 million jobs gained.
It was 2.5, but it's still not a net gain. That is a recovery of some jobs since April, but U.S. unemployment is still at its lowest. It is its worst. It may have improved since April, but overall it is still at its worst since the Great Depression.
So we were able to close our country, save millions of lives, open, and now the trajectory is great. Don't forget, New York is barely included, and that's one of our big ones. California is barely included because they're not open, and they should open. By the way, the mayor of Los Angeles wants to keep this thing closed for a long time. Look at what's going on in Florida. It's incredible. The job the governor of Florida has done, it's incredible. The numbers they're doing. You've got to open it up, and you do social distancing, and you wear masks if you want, and you do things. You can do a lot of things. You're getting closer together. Even you, I notice you're starting to get much closer together. It looks much better, I must say. You're not all the way there yet, but you'll be there soon.
Okay, this is not the choice of journalists. They didn't set up the chairs. The chairs are seated about a foot apart, so the president is violating ongoing CDC social distancing recommendations for the press, and then highlighting that things are better because the press is seated closer together.
And we were worried. We didn't know, is this going to be a hurricane or a major, major recession? A major recession that's not artificially caused, because this was artificially closed. We just said, boom, closed. And everything just stopped. And also, you know what else stopped? Big numbers on death by doing it. And that's why I had to do it. We've made...
It is such a strange mixed characterization to say that the president, who promised in February that there would be 0 deaths, has achieved a great success at stopping deaths when 108,000 Americans have died from this disease. And the president is highlighting Florida, saying that Florida reopening shows a great success. Florida has added nearly 10,000 new cases over the last week. 1.4 thousand cases were added just in the past 24 hours.
And this is what this is. This isn't a terrible recession. I don't even mention the D word. I don't talk about the D word. I don't want to talk about it. Because every time somebody even mentions it, I don't like the D word. But if you had a really, really big, bad recession, it could take 10, 12. How long did it take? In 1929, it took many years to recover from that. How long? 10 years. Yeah, 10. I heard 10. I think longer than 10, but that's okay. I heard 14, 15 years. Larry says 10, so let's go with 10. But it takes a long time to recover. But a hurricane, you're back in business in 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and it's...
Well, it is simply not true that in a hurricane you're back in business 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Ask the millions of Americans living in Puerto Rico who still have not adequately recovered from Hurricane Maria.
50-day rally in the history of our exchanges. The greatest 50-day rally. And we have a lot of protesters. And we have something else, right? We have something else. We have a pandemic. We've made tremendous progress really on both. If you look at where we've come on both, we've made tremendous progress on both. Tremendous progress. But you're looking, and the people are now starting to return to work. So it's been an incredible thing to see. It's been a beautiful thing to see. The experts predicted that the economy would lose tremendous numbers of jobs. And of course, from the beginning it has, but you're going to see how fast that's made up. I'm telling you, next year, unless something happens where the wrong people get in here, this can turn around. Your 401ks will go down to numbers. If people didn't get rid of stocks in their 401ks, they're almost even. Think of it. With a pandemic and with one of the worst things that's ever happened, our country's never lost 105,000 people. Whether it's World Trade Center, which was 2,900, or Pearl Harbor, which was less than that. We've never lost anything close to this. But it's not only our country, it's the whole world. The world is suffering so badly. 186 countries at this moment. And that affects us too.
It is 188 countries, and the president keeps saying that 105,000 Americans have died. It is up past 108,000.
It's a great thing because we're working with the world. And we'll work with China too. We'll work with everybody. But what happened should have never happened. So we had a tremendous morning, a tremendous announcement. It was shocking to even great pros. I watched Maria Bartiromo. I watched Jim Cramer. I watched a lot of people. Joe Kiernan, he was pretty positive. Charles Payne, he was very positive for a long time. A lot of people got it right. They had confidence in me, they had confidence in this team, and they got it right. I think that's the only thing they could base it on, because we were uncharted territory. I'd like to just say that renewal, restoration, and recovery of the most vulnerable areas of America is going to be my focus. It's going to be a big focus because it's taking care of itself, but we have to help that very vulnerable area. They're vulnerable. It's not right, and we're helping them, and we have helped them in the past, and we're also to opportunity zones, criminal justice reform. Nobody's ever done for the black community what President Trump has done. Think of it. Historically black small colleges and universities. They would come here for money every year for many, many years. After 3 years, I said, why are you doing this? Why do you keep coming here? They said, because we come. I said, don't you get a long-term deal so you don't have to come? The head of one of the very respected colleges looked at me and said, sir, we're like beggars. Every year we have to come to Washington and beg for money. I said, you should have a long-term deal. And we signed a long-term deal so they don't have to come. I'll miss them. I told him, I'll miss them. I got to know them. But the first year, I didn't think anything of it. The second year, I said, that's strange. Why are you here? And then the third year, not so long ago, same people, the heads of the historically black small colleges and universities, 44 people, maybe a little more than that, a little less than that sometimes. But after 3 years, I said, what are you doing? They said, the past administration did nothing for us. The administration before that did nothing for that. So I'm going to do it. So we did the opportunity zones with Senator Tim Scott, who's been fantastic. And by the way, it's one of the great unknowns because the opportunity zones, you don't talk about it. It's one of
the opportunity zones do get talked about. In fact, they're highly controversial. Many critics see them as giveaways to real estate speculators like people in the industries that Jared Kushner and Donald Trump have been in.
Putting people to work and getting money that they've never made before. So it's been really a terrific thing. It's now time for us to work together as we rebuild, renew, and recover the great promise of America. And that's true. We're going to work together. It'll all work out. It'll all work out. Some governors may need a little help yet, but I think for the most part they're in good shape.
It will all work out is hollow words for the families who are grieving 108,000 1,000 dead Americans. For those families, it will not work out. Those lost loved ones are not coming back.
White House is unbelievable. There was never any form of like, oh, gee, this sounds dangerous. All I could see is what I was seeing on television. But they were outside, and the Secret Service was incredible. But we were also helped by the D.C. police, and we were helped by the National Guard. Was unbelievable. They came in, and this was like a piece of cake. And I really am suggesting, because if you look at Minnesota and the great success we had there and other places, I'm suggesting to some of these governors that are too proud in New York, I mean, you see what's going on there. Don't be proud. Get the job done.
I am in New York. I see what's going on here. I see widespread, peaceful, organized, disciplined protest. There have been some very disturbing instances of police use of force on protesters. There have been isolated instances of vandalism and theft. But the suggestion that the president makes that New York has been, quote, ripped up or lost to looters is false.
The encounter with law enforcement, regardless of race, color, gender, or creed, they have to receive fair treatment from law enforcement. They have to receive it. We all saw what happened last week. We can't let that happen. Hopefully George is looking down right now and saying, this is a great thing that's happening for our country. This is a great day for him. It's a great day for everybody.
Now, of course, President Trump has repeatedly suggested that police should use more force, and he has typically characterized black and brown crime suspects as thugs, sometimes even as animals, whereas he has been very quick to celebrate armed white militiamen causing disorder as very fine people and as patriots.
As a bystander, but somebody that loved government, somebody that loved this country, I would watch and study and see, and just, when I say study, naturally study by watching. But if you go back, China was going to catch us in 2019. And that was like a given. You go back 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. It was always, China will catch America, catch the United States, and in 2019, and then it'll become the dominant economy. Never happened.
That actually is not true. Economists were not predicting that.
Tens of billions of dollars in tariffs that they paid for. I gave some of that money just to...
No, okay. This is a lie that the president keeps telling. He is either actively lying, knowingly lying to you, or he does not understand Basic Economics 101. Tariffs on Chinese goods are not paid by China. They are paid by U.S. importers, and the cost is usually passed on to U.S. consumers.
Make a good deal because of the possibility of tariffs. Because China's taken tremendous advantage of the United States. We helped rebuild China. We gave them $500 billion a year. How stupid are the people that represented our country with China and many other countries. But that's all changing. And it was in the process of changing very big. Again, China had a very bad year before the plague. And now I think hopefully they're going to have a great year. I want them to have a great year, but we're going to have better years than they ever had. We have a better system, much better system. We made Americans sure of themselves, and we took care of families. We gave benefits, and we sent...
So when President Trump claims that we gave $500 billion to China, this is another one of his made-up numbers. He is... What he's referring to is the trade deficit with China, which he has claimed was $500 billion. It, in fact, was never $500 billion. In 2018, it was $381 billion. But he's misrepresenting what a trade deficit is. He keeps portraying it with the idea that a trade deficit means that they owe us money. That's not what it means. It just means that we were buying $381 billion more of goods from China than they were buying from us. He he makes it sound as if they weren't paying bills. We were choosing to buy things from them because they were selling us goods at a price that we liked.
That you need a bond for manufacturing. Manufacturing, which we had up to 600,000 jobs prior to the plague, manufacturing rose to 225,000 jobs, up by. So we picked up 225,000 manufacturing jobs.
President Trump has repeatedly falsely claimed that President Obama said that manufacturing jobs would never come back and that you'd need a magic wand to bring them back. He did not say that. He ran on bringing manufacturing jobs back, and manufacturing jobs were coming back under the Obama administration. What he said was that you need active policies to help bring jobs back. You can't just wave a magic wand.
American history, but it's not going to stop here. It's going to keep going because so many places are closed. I was watching our great vice president today being interviewed on CNBC. He did a phenomenal job, and he made a statement. He said, this is not going to stop, and 100%. He's always attributing everything to me, but I'll attribute this statement to him. He said it's not going to stop because the numbers that you're looking at don't include all of those states that are closed. They haven't even opened yet. We're going to be stronger than we were when we were riding high. And our stock market is it's just short of an all-time high.
Again, a high stock market is great news for high-dollar investors in the stock market. I just want to pose a question to you. How much stock do you own? For millions of American families who don't own stock, for 40 million Americans who've lost their jobs, for 37 million families that are facing food insecurity, how much does a booming stock market help you? It's not a bad thing. It is good for the overall economy, but it is by no means the most important metric. And it does seem to be the one that the president cares most about.
Even include it because some of our biggest places aren't opened. They're opening up now. I think New York's opening up like as of today. And that's
New York City begins the process of opening on Monday.
We're all working hard. To save millions of American lives, we took that unnecessary evil, we took it out of the equation. We had to do what we did. We had a very, very strong push not to do anything. We would have lost so many people. But very importantly, the economy wouldn't have been as good as it is because nobody expected this. I don't think there's anybody sitting here that can say, I want to see it on tape, as opposed to just say, oh, I did that. But some were predicting pretty good numbers, people I mentioned.
I just want to highlight this again. The numbers that came out are not good. They are not good. Because they are not as bad as some expected does not make them good. U.S. unemployment is 13.3%.
Risk populations like the elderly and those in nursing homes while allowing younger and healthy Americans to get back to work immediately and open up our schools, open them up. We understand this disease now. We didn't understand it. Nobody's ever seen it before. It's very tough, very contagious, very mean to certain people. We've learned a lot. We didn't know. Nobody knew anything about it. But we learned a lot. And I have to thank everybody for working so hard. Jared and Mike and the task force and all of the people, the admiral, the general. They were saying, oh, you should use admirals. I said, I did. You should use generals. I said, I did. Used them both. We had some incredible people on the task force. The job they did in getting ventilators built by the thousands, we're giving to Nigeria, to France, to Spain, to Italy, to many, many countries, to UK. They're having a hard time.
I find it interesting that the president thanked Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, and did not thank the actual medical advisors. Dr. Fauci has been conspicuously absent from the president's briefings, and I believe, I'm asking Ian in our newsroom to check on this, but I believe that Dr. Fauci has not been allowed to speak at an event that President Trump has held since late April, when he contradicted President Trump, when President Trump said that there would be no coronavirus in the fall, and Dr. Fauci said that he was certain that there would be.
Patient in this entire massive country, and we didn't have ventilators when we started. The cupboards were empty. The previous administration left us empty cupboards. There isn't one patient, not one, that needed a ventilator that didn't get one.
That is not true. We have documented reports of patients that needed ventilators that did not get one. We know that hospitals jerry-rigged ventilators so that they could put multiple patients on the same ventilator. Regarding that cupboard statement, former National Security Advisor Susan Rice says, quote, "When the Obama administration left office, we left the national strategic stockpile fully stocked, adequately prepared, but more than the stockpile, we left this incoming administration with all the tools we had created for ourselves and that they needed to confront such a pandemic." President Trump has been in office for nearly 4 years. Even if the cupboard had been left bare, at what point does it become his responsibility to refill it? We know that he had been briefed early in his administration by the Pentagon about the need to restock supplies, and at the end of 2019 and in January by his intelligence officials about the need to prepare for this coming crisis. He did not invoke the Defense Production Act until near the end of March, and so that's the facts.
Even the ones that are very out there are not fully opened. So we're going to have some tremendous numbers coming in. When you look at the ridership in the airlines, what they've got, they went from 2% to a number that, if it's correct, I'd be surprised, actually. But it's a very high number. It's great. People are traveling. And you know what? They're traveling in the United States. And they're also driving. And they're building the trailers. They're building a lot of things. They're driving. People are driving. I may have to buy one of those things, drive around town. Maybe I'll drive back to New York with our First Lady in a trailer. What do they call that? An RV. An RV. Well, you should know Indiana's the capital of RVs.
The president is urging people to travel around, move around the country. He keeps acting as if the coronavirus pandemic is contained. The U.S. has added about 300,000 new cases in just the last week and 8,000 new deaths.
Sure, I felt it. I felt we were very powerful to come back. Hardest decision I ever made was when they all walked in, a big group of people, professionals, very professional people, good people. They said, "Sir, the best thing we can do is close it down." I said, "What are you talking about? We have this incredible, unbelievable country that's never done better, and you want us to close it down? I can't do that. What are you talking about?" And after listening for 10 minutes, didn't take long, I said, "I think we have to close it down." Because of the contagion and because of the power it had with especially certain people. Now, we didn't know the second part. We knew it was highly contagious because it spread like fire. But we didn't know that it hit certain groups of people. That helps us so much in testing and other things. So we're going to protect our elderly. We're going to protect especially our elderly with problems, whether it's heart.
The president also suggests that he is responsible for the shutdown orders. Multiple states issued states of emergency or shutdown orders before the president did anything of that nature. Washington state declared a state of emergency on February 29th. California and Maryland declared states of emergency on March 5th. On March 6th, Kentucky and Utah declared states of emergency. Trump spent that weekend golfing. He did not declare a state of emergency until March 13th and did not issue social distancing guidelines until March 16th. At no point did he actually shut down the economy, as he has claimed. This is something that he left up to states to do. 48 states had declared states of emergency before he issued social distancing guidelines. Remember that when he claims that he is the one who stopped this disease, which is not, in fact, stopped.
The PPP, that will especially help restaurants, hotels, and other businesses that have been very hard hit by the virus. This is going to make it 24 months, and I think you know the legislation as well as I do. I want to thank the Democrats. We had essentially unanimous votes, I think, in the Senate and the House, right? Whether it's unanimous or very close, it's a lot of people. But I want to thank the Democrats. We worked together on it great. And I hope we can get along with the Democrats. It's been a disaster in terms of relationship. But I hope we can get along because it's a great thing for our country. We did all of these numbers.
It's interesting to see the president say he hopes he can get along with Democrats. He has repeatedly called them very bad, sick people. Even just today on Twitter, he has been attacking them, not as people he disagrees with, but as bad people.
Let's just say the warlike posture is ridiculous because we have a great country. It would make a difference if we could get along. And maybe we can and maybe we can't. I mean, there are a lot of differences. We want low taxes. We want closed borders. We want people to come in, but they have to come in through merit. They want open borders. You can't have open borders, especially now when you have a pandemic. We said
the Democrats are not actually advocating for open borders, but I'm not going to get into the entire minutia of Democratic immigration policy.
500 miles very early next year. By the end of this year, we'll be over 400 miles. We're up to...
As of February, only 1 new mile of wall had been built. There has been replacing of pre-existing fencing.
And it's saved us a lot of anguish and grief, but you don't hear about that. One of the hardest things I've ever had to do is get the money necessary, which is billions of dollars, from a party that was totally opposed to it. They gave me other things. The military we could rebuild wasn't easy in terms of that. That's not their natural instinct. But for the wall, no, you can't have it, can't have it, can't have it. We had 9 court cases on the wall. But we won, and we got it. And now nobody talks about it. Nobody even talks about it. But it's great for our country. We have to have borders. And I've said often, I said long before I won on that great November day. Seems like a long time ago, 2016. I said, if you don't have borders, you don't have a country. So we have a lot of things to work with the Democrats. If we could work along with them, it would be great. If we don't, we're going to do great as a country anyway. We're going to do great anyway. But if we could work along with the Democrats, and I'm open to it. People say I wouldn't be open. Why would I be open? They did things that they should have never done. And you know what I'm talking about. Should have never done. But I'm totally open to it. But we could go even steps further. But it's already been historic. Nobody has done more in 3.5 years than this administration has done. Nobody has come close to doing the things.
That is not true.
We've cut regulations at a level that nobody's even come close to.
That may be true. This administration has done a vast amount of cutting of regulations.
Anything close, regulations, low taxes, rebuilt military, take care of our vets. We got choice approved for the vets. So instead of waiting in line for 4 weeks to see a doctor, they can go immediately outside, get a private doctor, we pay for the bill, and the vet is in great shape. And we actually save money, but more importantly, we save their lives, and we save the quality of their life.
President Trump has repeatedly taken credit for the Veterans Choice Act that was passed and signed into law by President Obama in 2014.
Find them, because tonight you'll be traveling all over the world looking for an unhappy vet. And we got accountability because we had a lot of bad people in the VA. It's called VA accountability, where we can now fire people that don't treat our vets good. We have sadists, we have thieves, we have a lot of bad people. And we can now, it's called VA accountability. Almost 50 years they've been trying to get it.
In terms of the VA, I also want to highlight that the Trump administration insists on continuing to administer hydroxychloroquine to veterans, even though there is increasing evidence to suggest that hydroxychloroquine is not effective in treating the coronavirus and increases the likelihood of death. At least 1,300 veterans have been given this experimental treatment already.
Our very important piece of legislation. Again, thank you very much to the Democrats. And then we're going to have a couple of words by a few of the people standing alongside of me. I want to thank them so much. And We'll talk to you soon.
Mr. President, why haven't you laid out a plan to stem racism? Mr. President, why haven't you laid out a plan to stem racism?
I'd like to sign this bill. This is a very different thing. And by the way, what's happened to our country and what you now see, it's been happening, is the greatest thing that can happen for race relations, for the African American community, for the Asian American, for the Hispanic American community, for women, for everything.
What's your plan?
Because our country is so strong, and that's what my plan is. We're going to have the strongest economy in the world. We almost are there now. We had the strongest economy anywhere in the world, and now we're going to have an economy that's even stronger.
Sir, how would a better economy?
I'd like to sign this.
Yeah, just to follow up, how would a better economy have protected George Floyd? Sure, I'll ask after. Will you take questions after, sir?
Black unemployment went up by 0.1%. Asian American unemployment went up by 0.5%. How is that a victory?
You are something.
How is that a victory?
Thank you very much.
I hope you appreciate what just happened there. Wait, hold on.
Great achievement. Feel so good about it. This is just the beginning. The best is yet to come. Mike, would you say a few words, please?
So, all right, so what just happened there? Yamiche Alcindor of PBS News, a black journalist who has repeatedly been attacked in very personal terms by this president. He's accused her of being nasty, of being threatening. She asked him a very legitimate question. He's saying that that these latest unemployment numbers are good news for black Americans. While unemployment for white Americans went down, unemployment for black Americans went up over the past month. She asked him about that, and he dismissed her question entirely. Ian, let's get a raw clip of that on Twitter, of that moment of that encounter.
President on mitigation, on recovery, and as you directed the White House Coronavirus Task Force, they're also a tribute to the fact that states across the country, now all 50 states, are reopening our country. Even before we came to the end of the 45 days, you directed us to give guidance to state governors and all the states and territories to safely and responsibly reopen. And now all of our states are in the process of doing that. It's remarkable to think that 2.5 million jobs and declining unemployment number actually dates to surveys done in mid-May.
This is such a strange event. This is such a strange event. 40 million Americans have lost their jobs since the beginning of this coronavirus pandemic. The employment numbers for last month were not as bad as predicted. 2.5 million jobs were added back in. But that is out of 40 million jobs lost. Getting 2.5 back out of 40 million lost is not actually good news. U.S. unemployment stands at 13.3%. That is better than the previous month. But before that, you would have to go back to the Great Depression to find numbers that bad. And as Yamiche Alcindor pointed out, unemployment for black Americans rose over this past month.
Congratulations, America. The comeback begins.
Thank you, Mary. And I think very importantly, because it's a great state and you have so many great states involved with energy, but we had basically a disaster just a month ago. We had a disaster with respect to energy. It was down to zero. It was worthless. And that's 5 million jobs, maybe much more than that indirectly, probably close to 10 million jobs, energy jobs in Texas, and North Dakota, and Oklahoma, and many other states. New Mexico, great state, great energy state it's become. And we saved that industry in a short period of time. And you know who helped us? Saudi Arabia and Russia. And then we got Mexico to do what they real.
It's interesting how intent the president is on praising Saudi Arabia and Russia. Russia, that meddled in the U.S. 2016 elections, and Saudi Arabia, which murdered a Washington Post journalist, tortured him and dismembered him with impunity and without repercussion from the President of the United States. President Trump has said very publicly that he likes Saudi Arabia because they buy apartments from him. This is economic advisor Larry Kudlow. I would like to highlight that his net worth is estimated around $25 million, and yet his wife applied for small business loan relief through the Paycheck Protection Act.
Says that housing applications for new homes are skyrocketing, new businesses and new business applications are skyrocketing. So we've seen a lot of pieces of evidence. The key to today's number, 2.5 million payrolls and 3.8 million households from which the unemployment comes. The key is that those who were temporarily laid off have gone back to work, 3 million some odd. And that's because of the reopening, and that's because of the success of the President and Vice President's mitigation policies, which had to be taken. Now the reopening begins. Here's a footnote. At May 12th, for the week the survey was taken, a little less than 50% of small businesses had reopened. According to the Chamber of Commerce, the most recent number in late May, early June, 80%, 79% of small business have reopened. So we're going to see more continued progress in the June jobs numbers when they come out. And I want to add also, my friend and colleague Secretary Stephen Mnuchin's leadership on the payroll protection program has kept people on temporary call, have kept them furloughed, but they knew they were going to come back. The PPP has distributed $510 billion and has probably saved as much as 50 million jobs. And overall, we've extended tax rebates and other payments, 159 million Americans for nearly $275 billion. The rescue package works. It was the largest in American history. Now, we are seeing weekly unemployment claims coming down, continued claims coming down. The 13.3% unemployment rate has come down. And I think...
Again, 13.3% is better than the previous month, but you would have to go back to the Great Depression to find numbers that bad previously.
Pandemic contraction is not a typical economic contraction. It was like a bad hurricane or a bad snowstorm. There's a lot of heartache in that, and there's a lot of hardship in that, absolutely. But they're sharp and fast, and they recover fast. And we are beginning to see this rapid recovery, which I believe will extend well into the third quarter and the fourth quarter. We're still looking for some 20% economic growth in Qs 3 and 4, and a big number in 2021 as we move forward with presidential policies of lower taxes and regulations and energy and fair and reciprocal trade deals that created a phenomenal economy before the pandemic and can recreate and rebuild that phenomenal economy afterwards.
It is striking to hear both Larry Kudlow and the President compare the recovery to the recovery from a hurricane. They have suggested that recovery from hurricanes are very fast. Ask the 3.2 million Americans who live in Puerto Rico if the recovery from a hurricane is fast.
And that's what you've instructed us to do, is to give you...
It is also worth noting that meteorologists are predicting a worse than typical hurricane season. As long as the President is indulging in hurricane analogies, we are expecting to have a much greater number of storms because of increased temperatures due to the climate crisis. And the President has raided funds from FEMA to pay for ice detentions. And FEMA has already been spread thin in responding to the coronavirus pandemic.
And the rest of her team. So thank you so much for your service, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to add, we'll be going for a payroll tax cut. We think that'll be incredible in terms of what we're doing, because
A payroll tax cut is good news for people who are on payrolls. It is not good news for the nearly 40 million Americans who have lost their jobs and aren't on a payroll.
we're going to be asking for a payroll tax cut. We'll be asking for additional stimulus money, because once we get this going, it'll be far bigger and far better than we've ever seen in this country. That includes as of 3 or 4 months ago, when everyone thought it was great, and it was great. And we're going to be doing things for restaurants and various pieces of the entertainment industry, which will be an incentive, whether it's deductions or whatever. But Steve Mnuchin's going to be working on that, because the restaurants will be a little bit harder to come back. Although I must tell you, Mike, I've seen some tremendous numbers from restaurants. But we're looking at doing something in terms of an incentive with taxes. It could be deductions. It could be something else.
It is very strange. The President of the United States continues to suggest that one of the strongest things that will help bring the economy back is making meals tax deductible. Have you ever gone out to a meal solely because it was a tax deductible expense? And how many times have you done that? It is not an average daily occurrence for most Americans.
Working with us in another example of overwhelming bipartisan support that is helping American business and American workers. Mr. President, this legislation is a direct result of you invited in leaders from the restaurant industry and the hotel industry. These are two areas that have been especially hard hit. The restaurants' number one ask was extending the PPP for 24 weeks, and this legislation delivers on this. So it is great to see the $500 billion that we've put to work in small business make its way into the economy, and now you see it in these numbers in them bringing more people back to work. So not only did this save jobs, but we now see people coming back to work, and we look forward to working with Congress on bipartisan issues to make sure we get every American back at work that was unfortunately laid off as a result of this virus. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, that appears to be the entirety of President Trump's event, and I have to say, it is striking for the president to be holding an event like this at this moment in our country's history. There are several things remarkable about this. It is remarkable that this administration is characterizing 13.3% unemployment as good news. There is no situation in which 13.3% unemployment for Americans is good news, simply because many people expected worse news. Just as there is no scenario in which 108,000 Americans dying from the coronavirus is good news, just because the number would have been higher if this administration had done nothing. But it is especially striking, especially discordant for the president to hold a celebratory event like this, highlighting stock market numbers at a moment when there are protests against racial injustice in all 50 states. The president refused to answer Yamiche Alcindor's question about what black Americans are to make of the fact that the president is celebrating a small decline in unemployment for white Americans, while unemployment for black Americans increased over the last month. And the president did not address the fact of what is driving the protests in all 50 states. A Rutgers University study found that police encounters are now a leading cause of death for young black men. Black men and boys suffer 2.5 times the risk of dying in a police encounter than white men and boys. And in terms of the coronavirus, new data released by APM Research Labs shows that more than 20,000 black Americans have died from coronavirus. This amounts to about one out of every 2,000 black Americans has already died from this disease. While black Americans make up only about 13% of the U.S. population, predominantly black communities account for more than half of all the U.S. coronavirus cases, and more than 60% of all the U.S. coronavirus deaths. While these economic numbers are not as bad news as they could have been, they are not good news, and they are not any comfort to families who are grieving loved ones lost to either the coronavirus, to police violence, or to any other cause. I want to thank you for tuning in. My name is Alan Piper. I am the NowThis Politics Senior Producer. I had support from our newsroom today, most particularly Ian McKenna and Nico Pitney. I hope that wherever you are, that you are staying safe. Thank you for tuning in.